Good morning. I hate to interrupt your conversation, but just want to let you know that training is happening in just a few minutes, so you can enjoy your breakfast. And remember that you need to pass around the sign-up sheets and the evaluations. Always good to evaluate after you've heard the presentation, but maybe you can at least get some of that started. Aha. Let's pause for a word of prayer. Father, we're grateful for your goodness. We thank you for this morning. We pray that you might help our minds to be attentive as we go through the training, that it might help us and assist us in being able to do what we do in a better way for your glory. We pray that in everything that happens today, that our lives might reflect you. We ask for your grace and strength in Christ's name. Amen. Does anybody have any announcements?
Good morning, everyone. I just want to let you know we are blessed with 3 new nurses in medical, 2 of which are here today with us. We have Gary Betts and we have Tanya Garcia Warren. And Christina Mina is our 3rd new nurse. So let's welcome them.
Good morning, everyone. We have a new ITP to introduce to you this morning. He comes to us from Philadelphia Induction Center. He transferred here, and we're glad to have him. He's working in direct care, and his name is Jeff Selden.
All right, I guess that means I'm up. Good morning, everybody. I always get nervous when I do these things, but today I shouldn't be, because if there's anything that I know to talk about, this should be the topic. So anyways, we're going to be doing a training. The training is called Person Served, Wellness Practices and Rights. I'm kind of excited about this. At first, I was like, I wasn't really sure, because this is a training that CARF said, hey, you guys have to do certain trainings. Here's a list. Here's one of them. And they didn't really give us too much to go by. And then I started looking into it, and I'm like, well, this is basically just talking about the program. And so I was like, nice, I could do that. So it's cool. We're going to talk about, today we're going to talk mainly about short-term. Last time when I was up here, I spoke a lot about long-term and the transitional process and the new curriculum and all of that, if some of you remember. I also spoke about the handbook for long-term, and I promised everyone a copy. So there are a stack of them back there. I'm not going to fail on my promise for all of you. I know a lot of you have received them. Those of you that haven't, there is a large stack on the table by Ed Sadie and John Thor back there. So if you want one, or actually if you don't have one or haven't looked at one, please take one and check it out. But today we're going to be talking mainly about the short-term program. And basically, over a year now, we've spoken a lot about the why for short-term here at Teen Challenge, Pennsylvania Adult Teen Challenge. And, Project 80 and the whole transition and why we need to make the transition. So today we're going to learn a little bit about the what. What is the program? What is short-term in a nutshell? Detox, levels of care, that type of stuff from a short-term clinical perspective, and kind of what we do really to prepare these guys to make healthy decisions and rational decisions in hope to, have them make the decision to ultimately step into life transformation through Jesus Christ. So, but the part of this is mainly going to be the mechanics of that. And that's kind of what happens in the short term. It's really all about mechanics. You know, it's not so much about big picture philosophy. It's really about, you know, stabilization, getting the person to wellness so that they're healthier, mind, body, you know, and then the kind of the soul, spirit comes a little bit later. But we got to get their machine operating properly, kind of like a tune-up, so to speak. And in a sense, that's kind of what's short term. But, so, I'll start off. My name is Michael Fangio. I'm the Vice President of Programming here at Pennsylvania's Out and Teen Challenge. I'll take a second to talk a little bit about the letters after my name. I've been noticing, working across departments and in different programs, and now my position kind of pulls me a little bit out of clinical, and I'm seeing acronyms and letters, and I'm knowing, like, well, what does that mean? I don't know. I see these letters all the time behind people's names, and I'm like, okay. So I'll take a second to explain mine. The LPC stands for Licensed Professional Counseling. That gives me a license through the Pennsylvania Department of Health to do clinical counseling, psychological assessment, and basically make recommendations for medical treatment and things like that through the Department of Health. The CCS is Certified Clinical Supervisor through Pennsylvania Credentialing Board. I've had that for about 4 years, and to obtain that, you have to be a clinical supervisor and in training for 2 years, and then over counselors, and then go through a rigorous training on models of supervision and things like that, and then you can get the Certified Clinical Supervisor credential. The last one is Certified Advanced Alcohol and Drug Counselor. There's 2 certifications in the Pennsylvania Certification Board for Alcohol and Drug Counselor. There is the main one that takes 2 years and some education and experience to get. And then after that, when you get your master's and things like that and continue to get your education, you can go for the advanced one. And that's this one right there. That's the Certified Advanced Alcohol and Drug Counselor. And you kind of get that through specific education in the drug and alcohol field, and then also experience and supervision, tons and tons of supervision. I've had supervision for almost 10 years now. Sometimes at least on a weekly basis. Most of the times it was multiple times a week. So I'm very, very comfortable with supervision at this time, and those of you that have kind of been in supervision with me, I think know that I enjoy it. I'm not sure about what everybody else's opinion is on that. All right, let's get into this training. So we're going to start, there's 3 areas, of course, you see here: wellness, practices, and rights. So basically that breaks down the short-term program into 3 areas. We're going to talk a little bit about what wellness is from like a clinical medical perspective. And then we're going to talk about practices, and that's basically what our program is, our short-term program. Talk a little bit about scheduling, but we're going to talk about something in practices that is kind of, is really what I'm passionate about, and I will try not to get a little crazy passionate when I start talking about this, but I do get excited, and that's theoretical techniques. We use a couple different, what we call third wave cognitive behavioral theoretical techniques. One of them is dialectical behavioral therapy up there. There's a 4-week track program that we use up there, and I'm going to break that down and explain what that is. We also do a client-centered process group up there that was derived from Irvin Yalom. He developed this theory, and it has a lot to do with letting the client direct the process in that stage of where they're at. It's beneficial for them to kind of guide where they're at, because it's so transient. You know, the short-term detox in nature is very transient. So it's hard to put tons of structure around that, because they're coming and going. And not only are they physically coming and going, but up here they're coming and going too. So the idea is to transition them from the coming and going transient nature into the stable nature and the more structure kind of environment where they can kind of adapt to that. But I'll explain a little bit about the theories and techniques behind that when we get into that. But first, let's talk a little bit about wellness. And in other words, bringing wholeness to the hopeless. But from a clinical standpoint, so when you think of wellness, and I was thinking about this, when I think of wellness, I think of like wellness centers. And the first thing that popped into my mind was kind of like urgent care or something like that. We have a bunch of urgent cares, kind of, you know, they're like the new hospital popping up all over the place. There's one in Lebanon that just kind of popped up, and I had the privilege of bringing my 5-year-old son there about a month and a half ago when he broke his nose. And so that was a very fun experience. But it actually was a little different than I thought because it wasn't like I had to wait 5 hours. I waited about an hour and a half, so it wasn't too bad. But I'm used to hearing, oh, you got to wait this, and I think that's because there's a lot more wellness centers popping up, which is great. And so our clinical program is a type of wellness center. Now, it's not like a wellness center that, kind of everybody comes in, any ailment you have, you can go to urgent care, basically, and then they can direct you to where you need to go. But the principle behind it is very similar to our wellness center. As we bring people in, we do have a specific niche. You have to really have some type of drug and alcohol issue, to kind of come to us or to be referred to us. But we aren't necessarily going to do the long-term care in our short-term clinical program. It's really about stabilization, assessment, stabilization, and referral is basically what it is. And most of you know that if you've been in this field for long enough that a week, 2 weeks, 4 weeks is nowhere near enough time for anyone that has a life-controlling problem that has probably been dealing with it for years and years to make a transformation, that they're just going to never turn to drugs and alcohol again after a week, right? That's not going to happen. We probably understand that for the most part. And if you don't, in my experience, I've never even seen it close to happening. So just to let you know. So that's not the nature of what we're trying to do. We're not trying to cure people. We're not trying to fix them. We're not trying to get them to a place where they never use drugs and alcohol again. That would be foolish if we thought that's what we were trying to do in the short-term program. All we're trying to do is bring them in, welcome them in, help them get stabilized, and assess them for the next level of care, and then make recommendations. That's what a wellness center is. And so that's part of what really the model behind our short-term program. It'll make a lot of sense, too, when I get into the theories and techniques and the practices part of it, too, about that. So in the behavioral aspect. So bring in wholeness to the hopeless. Where do our patients or students, and hopefully most of our patients, and that's our intention, is that they become students here at Pennsylvania Adult and Teen Challenge. But where do they come from? So we're seeing, we've seen a drastic transition in this over the last year or so. Before we started this clinical program, we were working across states. We had a demographic. We had people from Chicago and all of this. And part of the push that I believe, at least that I've heard, is because of our community has kind of been reaching out and saying, we need help. And now in this transition, we've seen that our community needs help. It's very, very clear to us when we see the population that's coming in now and the transition that we've made and the transition in our population, and we're already getting to the point where our nets are almost bursting, or some would say they have been bursting for a little while. But just from our community, just from the area. So, where do our patients and students come from? Well, now they come from the surrounding counties, and they're coming in droves. I mean, there's waves of people. I don't know if a lot of you are aware, but we've had probably for almost 2 months now, maybe even a little bit longer, most of the time we've had a waiting list for detox. That is, we kind of knew that was kind of coming, but, and part of that is there's a lot of, when you get this many people that are trying to come into your doors, and for different reasons, it's difficult to manage all that. But yeah, we've had that happen. So we're trying to figure out how to work with more people, because there's way more people out there already than what we can work with, and we're going to just keep seeing that trend, as we go into the next year. And they're all from much closer of a community, and they're looking for, at least at one point in time, they're looking for some form of wellness, and so that's what they're coming to us for, and that's what we're describing, that we are a wellness center. We are going to provide wellness for you. A lot of times they don't really know what that means. Just give me a second. But wellness is, when you're first looking for help, you just know that you need help, but you're not really sure what that help's going to look like. And part of our wellness program or wellness education is try to educate our patients and students on what we believe that help looks like, and align with the goals that they originally came in for. And hopefully that's, long-term sobriety, and then eventually a foundation with Jesus Christ down the road. And so that's what they're looking to get out of our program. Chris told me specifically not to put my hands in my pocket. So someone point at me if I put my hands in my pocket. How do we help them? And then that's what leads me to this point. How do we help these guys? And again, specifically today, I'm just going to be touching on the short-term program. And I promise I won't keep you to 11, because I could do that talking about this topic. Program schedule. Do I have this stuff? Let's see. Yes, I do. Okay. Practices. So now we're getting to the next section. Wellness, practices, person rights, patient rights. So we're going to talk about 3 areas in practices: program schedule, counseling techniques, and levels of care. So program schedule. Oh, I probably need to. Yeah, the clicker. Thank you. There we go. Guess you can see it okay. So this is half of the day, and we'll get to the next half. So this is basically the short-term program in a nutshell. Yeah, thank you. So basically, 6:30, wake up, medication, those types of things in the morning. A lot of you may know the basics of the program. You see the guy shuffling up and down the hill, and kind of those of you that aren't directly involved in the short-term program, you may wonder what's going on up there all day. So I'm going to break it down for you. Breakfast, 7:15 to 8. Some of these, forgive me if I think I have the most current updated schedule, but 8:10 to 8:40, morning meeting. So morning meeting up there every day, basically happens with a short term, and it's to get them centered for the day. And these guys know how important it is to try to get them centered for the day. That starts the day off. It's a very, very busy day in short term. If you want, those of you that haven't been walking through the halls or haven't, I would encourage you to take a walk through there. You could take a walk through right before a morning meeting. You could take a walk through right before the 9:30 group or around lunchtime. Or really, if you want to get your most excitement in the short-term program, probably around 4 o'clock, I would take a walk through the short-term or detox unit. And that's when all the excitement is happening up there, or at least a good amount of it. And so, but you'll get a lot of excitement throughout the day. So, morning meeting, usually that's led by like a CA or a counselor. Sometimes one of the clinical supervisors will lead that. Usually there's a overview of like the guidelines that are read off. There's like a spiritual reading. We have a book that's a 12-step book called Just for Today, and it's very, from my point of view, my perspective, it's almost like reading a devotional, but it just doesn't say like Jesus. It says God and higher power and stuff like that. But it's very scripturally based in a sense. But anyways, it's a spiritual reading for the program, and that's read, or at least a lot of times it's read off. And then sometimes there's like discussion that is being had where maybe there's some community concerns or something like that, and really just kind of getting centered for the day. The next main thing is, then they have chores and room cleanup. So then after that, everybody goes onto the unit and has to like tighten up their room and mop and stuff like that, help with our ITPs. Now, it doesn't always happen the smoothest, but sometimes it happens better than others. So, but we do try to instill. We start to try to instill at least some sense of working, because we do want to provide that. But at the same time, we have to understand where they're at, and kind of meet them where they're at. I mean, some of these guys literally was dead the day before in the streets. And then, the next day to say, hey, here's a mop and bucket, start mopping, we have to be sensitive to those types of things. There's a lot of case-by-case situations in detox and short-term. And, the progression is that the person will become higher functioning as they go through the levels of care. And so that's our intention. But we also, as people who are working with these guys and healthcare professionals and counselors and mentors and pastors, we always have to try to do assessments inside of us of where this person is at. Because even if they're seemingly at a certain level of care physically, because they've moved through the stages, does not necessarily mean that equates to where they are emotionally, mentally, spiritually, And so there's another whole training on stages of change and things like that a lot of the counselors have had, and I'm actually working on preparing so that we as counselors can make internal assessments constantly of what stage of change is this person in, because one indicator is physically where they are at in level of care, but really there's a lot of other indicators. And I believe, in the way that I work with people, is that it's my responsibility to make also those other assessments and then to adjust as the way that I'm working with this person to where they're at. Hence, meeting them where they're at the level of stage, because it isn't necessarily. So that's why sometimes in long term, it's not black and white. It moves more towards like concrete responsibilities and structure as they progress through the levels of care and the stages of change. But if you've talked with me about any of these issues at any given time, and some of you are going to hear this, I am usually don't get to absolutes. The only absolute in my mind is Jesus Christ and what He did on the cross. That's the only absolute. Other than that, you know, we can get closer to truth and walking in truth, you know, because that's what we're trying to do, is continue to walk in the truth. But for us and for our engagements in relation, there's no black and white. You know, I'm not the judge. I'm not the creator. I'm working with you. We're all in relationship. And a lot of it is just meeting each other where we're at, you know, and trying to work with that, with hopefully, you know, similar goals, ultimately to walk along with what the Father is shown us. But anyways, programming. The next thing is 9:30 to 11 o'clock process group. So there's two main, when I start to break down the theoretical approach, there's going to be really two main things that I'm going to break down. I mentioned it a minute ago. It's the Yalom therapy approach and process group, and that's patient-centered type of an approach. And then there's the third wave of CBT, which is DBT, and that's more of a structured, directive approach. So person-centered approach is really kind of, in a sense, trying to draw out of the person what change looks like. What do they want? Why did they come to us? You know, what is the reasoning from their perspective, from their point of view? Because it also is tied into what we call motivational interviewing. And motivational interviewing starts to, the way that you look at it is to try to develop internal motivation for the patient or student to want to change on their own, because that's most powerful. It is so much more powerful if the person wants to make the decision to change over me wanting that person to make the decision to change. And so there is an overarching assumption that when you come to our program, we have some like-minded goals, right? Probably the biggest overarching assumption is that you want to probably not do drugs and alcohol, or you want to move away from that at some time in your life. That's what we would all hope, because we are mainly we're a drug and alcohol program, especially our short term, but even our ministry is catered towards people who have those types of life controlling problems. You know, we're not necessarily a discipleship program for anyone that wants to come in from any church just because they want discipleship. We have a specific niche that we work with. So that's hopefully the common goal that we have with the people that we work with. Sometimes, and we all know that really isn't the case, but that's where the base is. Apart from that, we want to draw, with this type of an approach, especially in the beginning, we want to draw out the specific goals and actions from the person to reach that common goal. Sometimes we got to realign and say, hey, look, do we have this common goal? Because if we don't, then maybe we're not the right place. Maybe you're not here. But that conversation is also very tricky. But we want to have that common goal, and so in this person-centered type of an approach, in that group, it's basically like, you know, setting up goals for the day. Here's goals for the day. What are some goals? Here's a common goal. Here's the roadmap and where we're going. Here's where we're at today. What are some goals that you would say to kind of move us a little bit further to where we're going? That happens every day at that group, that type of stuff. And of course, each group may be a little bit different. Sometimes the counselors are bringing their own style. Of course, they're bringing their own style, but they're also bringing some techniques that they've learned too and picked up along the way, and I definitely encourage that, and I know the clinical team encourages that, to bring that. But that hopefully is the overall idea of that group. After that, and in between a lot of these times, there's time for individual counseling, because that also needs to happen. Really, it's 1 to 2 times a week there's individual counseling, but the short-term program philosophy, and then the state has really put out there, and really because there's a lot of evidence that shows in short-term intense counseling, group therapy provides the biggest benefit, biggest bang for your buck, so to speak, rather than individual counseling. If you're only here for a week and you have one individual session or 7 group therapy sessions, or if you're here for a week, you have 7 individual sessions, or 7 group therapy sessions, there's lots of research out there that shows that the person is going to retain a lot more from the group sessions than if they had 7 individual sessions in 1 week. And really, it's because of the group dynamic. And we can get into, that's a whole nother discussion to talk about group roles and how group roles, we leverage as counselors the group to promote change. And it's kind of like a microcosm of what's going on out there. And then the counselor is the facilitator that talks about, what is going on out there that is promoting the negative behavior, and what could we do to change that in the group dynamic. And it just promotes a lot of change in a short period of time. So that's why we focus on groups primarily in the 30-day program. Now, we do individual counseling. We do 2 different types. One is, we do a few different types, but assessment is a form of that. Treatment planning is individual, but then also family therapy. And so we do a lot with family therapy up here. A lot of you know about the SAFE program. And so the way that it transitions into, the way that it translates into short term is that we encourage a family type of session each week of hopefully the 4 weeks. And so the first week, it's a phone session with the patient. And again, all of this is ideal. It's not always fleshed out exactly as I'm explaining it, because there's a lot of different variables that happen on the day-to-day. But this is hopefully the goal and the overarching program structure that we're always trying to work towards. First week is family phone session, and of course we also have the SAFE department reaching out to the families and things like that, connecting with them and such. Second week, hopefully, is an on-site family session with the patient, the counselor, and the family member. That's the only visits that we have in the short-term program. It's through a structured family session. Third week is hopefully a phone conference, or that's kind of the goal. Fourth week is another family session and trying to develop aftercare and getting ready for the next step. What is the next step? And a big part of detox and short-term, from day one, we're getting ready for the next step. Because as these guys know, those guys may even be there for they may not be there the next day. That's kind of the reality of what we're dealing with. So all of this that we're doing, we're also trying to get ready for the next step. And hopefully that next step for most of our guys is right next door, or downstairs, or hang out in the chapel for a little bit. All right, I got it. Second part of the day, counseling after lunch. There's, We also have what we do. We try to incorporate rec. Some of these things are still in development, of course, because basically we've been open for a year, and we're trying to really do a lot of things. So like recreational therapy is a really big thing out there. And it should be a really important topic for us, because wellness, if you think of wellness, a lot of people will also think about physical wellness. The physical wellness is very, very important. And so hopefully we'll be more in development. We have some great facilities here. In this last year, we got a really nice weight gym. We're still working on our basketball courts and stuff like that internally. Hopefully we will keep working on that, and I would like to keep developing structure. A lot of programming also requires resources, and intense resources. I've worked at programs where they had recreational therapists, licensed recreational therapists. I've worked at programs where they have had licensed art therapists, and there's licenses out there for these people. I've worked at programs that they've had equine therapy, where they lease a ranch and bring their patients once a week with a therapist that's trained in equine therapy, horse therapy, where they interact, and it's amazing. At first, I'm like, what are you talking about, horse therapy? But then I had a few colleagues that I became very close friends with that were these therapists, and really broke it down to me, the interaction between a person where they're at that point in their life with this huge animal that is super smart. And there is an interaction there, and the person has to learn to regulate their emotions in order to interact in a certain way with the horses. And it's phenomenal. And I'll talk a little bit about emotional regulation in a minute, but that's really where that is. So anyways, but we would like to develop some specific types of programming here, like recreational therapy, and get better at that. Right now, we try to get the guys out of the unit as much as we can with the resources that we have. We also do relapse prevention. We just started a smoking cessation program that is state-sponsored. Dr. Gilbert has been spearheading this with Greg McFarland, and we've been doing, we're doing 2 groups a week, Dr. Gilbert has been trained through a state and national training seminar. I think it was a week-long seminar. Greg is going to be going to that same seminar so that they are actually like licensed or certified smoking cessation counselors, so that we can really not just say, hey, we're the place where you can't smoke, and so, you know, we're going to be constantly on you about smoking because everywhere else allows smoking. And just a side note, I heard that in 2 years, all rehabs are going to have to go smoke-free. Let's hope that that is the case. But that's part of what makes it very difficult for us, because they can go next door and smoke all day long, and so that's part of our challenge. But we can also say, hey, look, we're partnering with the state because everyone understands that smoking is like not a good thing, you know. So we're going to do something more about it than just say no. You know, we're going to actually promote a program. Hopefully, after it picks up and takes off, we might bring some aspects of it into our long-term program also. But that's we gotta get it going and up and running first in short term, and kind of figure out how we're doing it well, because there's stringent standards through the state. So we're doing that, and there's different type of program that we're constantly looking into, specialized programming to make our program better. You know, because that's what we want to do. We want to do it on both aspects, not just in ministry, and constantly having that drive to making our ministerial program very well, so because we know ultimately what that means for our guys if they can connect to Jesus Christ. But we also want to have a very good program clinically, so that we can connect relationally across the state and be that place and be in the forefront. I mean, how cool would it be if we were looked at as like the premier program across the state, and people looked at us like that and revered us, and we know, and some of those people would know truly why we strive for this, you know, because of that heart condition that we're all striving for inside. But at the same time, it's that initial connection with the public, with relationship with our communities, that we could spread the light out there, the more we can get connected with them. And so that's what I believe, why it would be better, constantly better to even, you know, of course, reaching out to the patients and the students and helping them with transformation. So we have our DBT group. I'll go into that in a second. The DBT group is developed around a 4-week track group, and there's 4 modules of DBT, and I'll get into it. And we do each module 1 week, and the hope is that the short-term guys are here for 4 weeks is the hope, and the hope is that they go through each track group each week, and I'll explain that in just a second. And that's from 3 to 4 every day, and that's rotated by the counselors. The counselors run the DBT group, and they rotate through it by running it and through the modules. Then we have 12-step recovery or chapel. So we can provide the option, and a lot of you know this, to go to chapel and to participate in spiritual services. A lot of them choose to do that. A lot of them go to chapel almost every day, or if not every day. We've had, even as of recently, some very amazing chapel services where the short-term program gentlemen have been involved and have not only been involved, but have engaged in a miraculous way. And I hear from like Craig and Bradley and some of the guys of what has happened at chapel. Sometimes I come up and see it, and every time I hear that, it just warms my heart, man. It just is like, it's so awesome to hear that and to be a part of that in any way that I can. And so, you know, that's the goal, and it's happening, and it's really, really cool. But we also provide 12-step meetings too at the same time. And we're going to develop that program too. We have an outside group, or we got to kind of reconnect with that partnership with an outside group. I'd like to bring more outside AA groups and programs here to do this, because, you know, those guys that maybe aren't ready for our chapel and for all of that, you know, 12-step groups, and I've seen this a lot working outside of here. People get saved in 12-step groups all the time. I've seen it. It's amazing. And so that can happen in 12-step groups, but if anything, it also helps promote stabilization. And then that's the goal of the short term, is to promote stabilization, promote values, some type of values in their lives. And 12-step groups are an amazing job. And so we're also going to develop and build on our 12-step relationship in 12-step groups here too. Free time at nighttime, and then kind of lights out. And you can see the kind of the rotation here at the bottom for the DBT group. Okay. The two types of, for now, theoretical approaches that we are trying to, or that I encourage our counselors to follow up there. The process group. These are 12 therapeutic factors for group counseling. This is derived from Irvin Yalom, and this is basically the Irvin Yalom model, group process model. And so I encourage the counselors and process group to follow this type of approach for most of the groups that they do. And will be ongoing trainings to continue to follow that. But take a look at that for a second. Can everybody see that? Thank you, Ozzy. Amen, brother. Some of these, in my experience, I used them more than others. For instance, installation of hope. You know, what does that sound like to you guys? You know? And this is a secular approach. But installation of hope, you know, these guys are hopeless. You know, and it doesn't just say, hey, have hope. Okay, you got it now. It doesn't work like that. I mean, you guys know that, right? So there's techniques, there's processes that some work better than others. And these are research-based. Like, these have been years and years, these approaches were kind of, before he, was able to publish his book and his material, he tested this out on groups of people, lots and lots of groups of people, and did scholarly clinical research to back it. And the research just proved that these were better approaches than others that were out there. And so it's a really effective approach. So, but some of these you use, installation of hope, cohesion, group cohesion, you know, like-mindedness, getting the group to understand that we all have a common goal and we can work together to get to that common goal. You know, very, very important. Catharsis, release of emotional tension. Does anyone have that need at all? Imitated behavior. You've heard me talk about modeling, you know. We as counselors, facilitators, mentors, pastors, anybody who's trying to model after who, you know, we are trying to model our lives after that, but then we're also trying to lead the next person, you know, as Christ works through us, or as we develop healthier lifestyles ourselves, because they're looking at that. That's imitation. It's a factor in this. Cognitive recapitulation of family of origin issues. Anyone know what that is? That's a mouthful. So a lot of times what happens in the group, or there's a thing called transference, countertransference in counseling. And it comes when the patient or student sees you as their father. And I don't have a good relationship with my father. I'm just pointing at it. You're my father and I don't have a good relationship. I'm going to, you know. But that's basically what happens. I'm the student or I'm the patient, and I see you as my father. I see you as my mother. I see you as my caseworker. I see this guy as my younger brother, the guy next to me. I see that person as my uncle, my drunk uncle. I see that person as this. I see this person as that, right? And so in group, it's kind of crazy how this happens, but the person actually walks into that door and becomes a whole different person and puts on their third child, second child, little Johnny, older beat-up brother, and all of a sudden becomes that person in the group and reacts differently to different people. And that's how transference happens in a group setting. It also happens in an individual setting with the counselor a lot. And so we talk about transference, countertransference. How do we respond to that? The first part of it is kind of identifying it, you know, in the group, pointing it out and bringing a framework around it. That's what helps us so much, is when we become aware of things. There's so much outside of our awareness. There's a thing called the Johari window, where there's certain areas that we will never even see in our lives, and that other people see. There's things that we see. There's all of this stuff, right? Part of it is being brought to our awareness and then bringing some structure around it. Awareness is the first step. Super important for these things, for us to become aware. Second part is, what do we do with it? And that's where the structure comes in. That's where the education comes in, the training. But a lot of what this is about is just awareness. The morning group is to try to make them more aware of what's going on. You know, Broaden their horizon rather than, I need dope, I need dope, I need dope. Broaden their horizon, making them aware of big picture. And then we go into the DBT, where the structure comes in place. This is where we have skills training. This is where we give them concrete material to do. What do I do? Now I'm becoming more aware. What do I do? Okay, this is the next step. And then there's 4 modules of this. The first two I'm going to say are mindfulness and interpersonal effectiveness. And so, mindfulness. This is, if you know anything about DBT or you've heard anything about DBT, there is debates in the industry and especially in religious circles about DBT not being a good approach. I've been in many of those debates. I've actually trained. I've done tons of DBT trainings before. The debates focus on this one module, mindfulness, and the reason why they focus on this one module is because Linehan, I believe, is the person that really kind of developed this. And when I don't know if she was a Christian religious person, but I do know that there's a lot of Eastern approaches that she uses to flesh this out, so to speak. For example, the mechanics is prayer, right? In mindfulness. The mechanic is prayer. So if someone said prayer to me, what am I going to think prayer looks like? I'm going to think probably a lot of what you guys are thinking what it looks like. Maybe I'm in my prayer closet. Maybe I'm looking at a couple of scriptures. I'm praying to, Jesus Christ. I'm thinking about the picture of Jesus as brought to me in the Gospels, and that type of stuff. So the mechanics, again, is prayer, right? Prayer and meditation. She develops prayer and meditation through, she says, because this is a secular approach, she says, yes, that's good, but there's also this other type of prayer. That's the debate in this. And I'm just bringing this forth because some of you might have already heard that or felt that. But again, you can easily make that debate in this, that's not, you can promote any type of prayer. And that's what we're doing in the short term anyways. 12-step program is the same type of thing. It's agnostic. My doorknob is my higher power. Look, you were just banging dope and dead on the street yesterday. Okay. Your doorknob's a higher power for right now. If that's keeping you sober for right now and in our program, so that we can get you the next day, because in 3 days, you might all of a sudden have a rational mind and want to change and come over. And that's the ultimate goal for us, but they're not there yet. Stages of change. So you want to be thinking about this. Other than that, all 3 other modules are amazing. So anyways, essential part, mindfulness, trying to calm the mind, get them quiet, because if anyone, those of you that are in recovery or have or worked with that, the mind races. It's like, the one thing I remember is when my mind started to get quiet again, and for me, the peace of Christ came into me, and I didn't have to be like, who am I calling? Who am I calling? Who am I calling? What am I doing? What am I doing? Who am I calling? What am I doing? All right, Friday. Oh my gosh, where am I going? I don't have anything. I need to get something. From the minute I woke up to the minute I went to bed, for years. This is what the addict mind is. It never shuts up. So mindfulness helps start that approach. Basically telling your mind just to shut up. Quiet down. Here's some techniques that I can give you to quiet down. Then you get into interpersonal effectiveness. That's relationships. Has everything to do with relationships, with our friends, the negative relationships that we should probably move away from, and our family especially, because we want to build family relationships. Has all to do with interpersonal effectiveness. I'm going to go real quick here because I'm over time, and I want to make sure that I don't. I can email this PowerPoint out to all you guys. Third one is distress tolerance. So distress. All you need to do is think about, is anyone in distress up there? Are we ever in distress? I am. How do we tolerate it? How do we raise our threshold of tolerance? What is tolerance? We talk about tolerance in the drug and alcohol world, right? That means I can use more drugs and I don't get high as my tolerance increases. Well, you can take that and flip it over, distress tolerance, same type of thing. I can take on more distress and I don't freak out. We want to get the person to that. We want to, this has a lot to do with de-escalation and things like that, but distress tolerance, there's techniques in this that help our patients, and then hopefully they can take some of these techniques into the long term to bring them down. And then, the last one's emotional regulation. Emotional regulation is closely tied with distress tolerance, but it's a little bit different because it doesn't necessarily have to be distress situations. It can be mania. Like, I'm very, very happy today. So happy, I'm jumping around all over the place. You know, that's an emotion sometimes that we need to kind of balance out, level out. And there's techniques to do that without amphetamines. Anyone know that? Did you guys hear that one? Were you awake? There's techniques to do that without amphetamines. Emotional regulation. I had to learn it. I was the most ADD person. I was diagnosed bipolar, just for a little self-disclosure, a little bit before I came into Teen Challenge. Most of the time in Teen Challenge, I cycled like you wouldn't believe. I was a guy that was crying at the window for most of the day, and then after I had like some sugar or something, I would be driving everybody in the house nuts because I'd be running around, be like, hey, what are we doing? You know, up and down, up and down. And the vans, I'd always be the back of the van. Get away from me, you know. But, you know, I learned how to do it through these types of principles. And this is the thing. These principles are found in the Bible. They are found in the Bible. Like when I started getting to school and learn about this, I'm like, hey, wait a minute. I learned how to do that same thing through Scripture. It's the same thing. So that's why I get so excited about this stuff, because what my approach is that maybe we could help someone get there a little sooner. You know, that's the idea, is that, you know, God knows everything. God has plans for all of us. You know, everything happens for a reason, right? But the idea is that we're not fixing people here. We're not doing that. I'm not fixing people. We're not fixing people. You know, we're assisting them to hopefully get to where they're already going. You know what I mean? And if we can help them get there a little quicker, we may save lives. And that's the thing. That's the goal for some of this, is to help them get there a little bit quicker. So, like, if I'm trying to work on a car, you know, if I had all the time in the world to just spend to figure out my car and YouTube it and all this stuff, eventually I'm probably going to learn how to tear my engine apart. And I could buy the tools and stuff like that. But what if I went to mechanic school? You know? What if I sat with a master mechanic and he said, here, do it like this, showed me some skills? I would probably do it a lot quicker, right? That's the intention with these skills. That's the intention of what we do. And then, of course, in our field, hopefully we can save lives through it, because the ultimate reality of this is if they don't hurry up, each day is putting them at higher and higher risk of death. That these guys are alive doing what they're doing. You know, that I was alive doing what I was doing. Each day, I got progressively worse. All right. The levels of care. Basically, you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. We start off with detox. Levels of care become progressively less structured with less staff interaction. And that's because the structure of the day-to-day all increases. So the structure of staff engagement decrease, and the structure of the day-to-day and the functioning of the person should increase. That's the progression. So detox, staff engagement, highest structure. These guys are being woken up. How often? Every 4 hours or less? Every 4 hours or less for 5 days. Now, in the beginning, when they're going through withdrawal, they're kind of, you know, welcoming that for a minute. But there's a time when that changes, and they're like, get out of my face. I'm trying to sleep. But we have to provide that level of structure. That's the highest level of structure, highest staff involvement. You know, and Greg's out there. We got people in their face all the time. They step into short term, a little bit less. Not every 4 hours, but they have to go to groups. They have to do this. They have to do that. You know, they step into long term. It's less structured. They have more free time. You know, even if it's on a job or whatever, it's not like the rigid schedule. Every day something is accounted for. They have CAs in short term following them around all day long, staff members that are following these guys around all day long. That's a higher level of structure. Lower level of individual independent structure. And then the progression goes, and the idea is that hopefully as the patient becomes a student, they can take on that responsibility for themselves and start to develop that and take that on for themselves. And we provide a little bit less structure. We also have to provide an environment for that, because we will never know if it happens if we don't. If we control every single aspect of the lives of the students here, we'll never know if they can do it themselves or not. And so we kind of have to give them room for Bradley and Craig and the team to chase them around all day long, some of them. But you know what I'm saying? So anyways, that's the level of care. Detox, short-term, long-term, and then continuing care. Continuing care can happen here with us in long-term. Continuing care happens outside of here. But continuing care has to happen. Wherever it may be, us as professionals have to set up some type of continuing care. That's part of our job. We have to set up intensive outpatient counseling. We have to set up other co-occurring facilities, church involvement, support groups, all of that stuff. Because without continuing care, they're going to just, and of course they have to align with us. That's part of the deal. It's us doing our job at setting it up, and them with aligning, and things happen. They don't align, which usually tends to happen more often, they're back into our program, and they're in the cycle. And our goal is to pop them out of the cycle, or help them jump out of the cycle. But we have the cycle going on. All right, patient rights. Again, I'm going to email this out. This is basically just policy, and so, you know, but it's probably very helpful for some of you. I'll just read through it. Please be advised that a person receiving treatment under Section 7 of Pennsylvania Drug and Alcohol Abuse Act, that you have the following rights. So this is given to each and every patient that's come here. It's in the handbook. They have to sign off on it, this exact form. And so this is being read as like I'm the patient, it's been given to me. You have the following civil rights and liberties. Please read and understand the following information concerning your civil rights and liberties. 1, you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect throughout your entire stay at PAATC. You may not be deprived of a civil right solely based on treatment. 2, you may not be discriminated against on the basis of race, creed, sex, ethnicity, color, national origin, marital status, handicap, or religion. 3, you have the right to file a grievance if any of your rights are violated or if you have been discriminated against. Contact the counseling department for a grievance form and guidance in this matter. This is, again, given to every single person here. You have the right to inspect your own records. To do so, you must make a written request to counselor asking permission to inspect your records. Please be advised that the Student Services Director, got to change that one, may temporarily remove portions of your record prior to your inspection if he determines that the information may be detrimental to you. Student Services Director will schedule a time for you to review your record. Records will be reviewed in the presence of lead counselor or clinical supervisor. You have the right to appeal a decision limiting access to your records to the Student Services Director. Your appeal shall be made in writing to the student, because there's other regulations limiting us to certain things that we can actually disclose in their record. So they can appeal that, but there's certain things that we can disclose or certain things we can't. You have the right to request the correction of inaccurate, irrelevant, or outdated, incomplete information in your record. You have the right to submit rebuttal or memorandum to your own record. You have the right to request in writing reconsideration of a decision to terminate your treatment to clinical program director. If you have any questions concerning the above information, please feel free to ask a staff member or primary counselor. And that's it. So we have grievance forms. There is a policy that HR has that is a grievance policy, and I want you guys to know and to make sure that the students, if students come to you, if patients come to you and say, I have a complaint against this staff, really the first thing we say, hey, we can start a grievance policy. We can start a grievance form. It's on the HR folder in the S drive. If any of you need grievance forms, email me, email Heather Powell. We can get them to you. We welcome them. We want to bring them in, because the thing is that the way that I look at this stuff is it just makes us better, the better we get at that, you know? And so, but basically that's the national standard of patient rights that we have as a disclaimer in our programs. All right, well, thank you very much for listening to me. I went over 15 minutes. I apologize for that, but have a great day. And I only put my hands in my pocket one time. Thank you, Ozzy. Oh, you know what? Thank you, Melissa.